Welcome, everyone, to the Captive Audience. It is the 30th of December of 2025. We have just a little over, 18 hours left, or a little under 18 hours left in 2025. And what better way to count down the hours and minutes than to do it with the fabulous Jeff Eager with Oregon Roundup, which is OregonRoundup.substack.com. Also has a podcast. He's the former mayor of Bend. He's an attorney and a great investigative journalist, and really has. If we had Jeff Eager journalism in every outlet in this state, the state would instantly be different. And I think that's why we're so lucky to have Jeff here with us tonight. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate that. You're too kind, but happy to be here again.
Well, and you've been on top of some great stories. I figure we can launch into that and then kind of walk through the different stories that are shaping the state, or in some cases, they're not shaping it enough because of what it implies and what it means. But you stay with it and you point it out. And on top of that, frankly, I think because you stay after it, these things start to enter to the popular lexicon. And I know we've been talking about some of these for a while. So for starters, I think the big story, because of what we didn't know and now know about other examples of this in the country, the Oregon Medicaid fraud. Wind the clock back to what? Must have been March or April, I think, when this first emerged. It was something around that. And it was the $2.3 million that was sent by Medicaid through the Oregon Health Plan, right, to Uplifting Journey, an outfit in Lake Oswego, which came to light because it was the home address of a Trende Aragua gang member who was arrested for attempted murder, kidnapping up in Washington State. And it just sort of like, he just started peeling back the pieces of the onion, and it got stinkier and stinkier. And then, of course, that story has progressed since then. We're finding out that not only did the Oregon Health Authority botch the whole thing and really not follow up on it. They wrote checks to somebody, but they also had some internal communications about what they were doing to put scrutiny on what has now kind of turned into maybe something on the order of $60 million tied to a pastor and some companies in Arizona. And we shouldn't be surprised at this at all, because now we're looking at what happened in Minnesota, the home state of Tampon Tim, the vice presidential candidate on the Democrat ticket. Yes, that's how close we came, folks, to somebody who apparently was overseeing a state whose fraud amount might reach $9 billion, according to the latest. And it's just more and more and more. Like, we now know independent journalists, just like yourself, went and tried to talk to someone at one of these daycare centers where the name Learning was misspelled. It was the Leering Center. And I mean, you can't make this up. This is the stuff Babylon Bee would come out with and be like, that's funny, and it's actually, no, that it used to be that you tried to measure time and how long it would take for a Babylon Bee article to then become the truth. Now it's inverted. Now Babylon Bee articles are being written as the truth before the Babylon Bee can come out with them.
Yep.
So what is the latest, and is there something I left out of the summary of how we got here?
Well, there's a lot of moving parts to that story. So yeah, you left some of it out, but we'd be talking for a few hours tonight just about the facts of the story if we didn't leave anything out. I think that um, the stuff that's come up since I was last on. So there's this. I mean, just for a little basis for everyone, this business called Uplifting Journey formed in 2023. Immediately registers to receive Medicaid reimbursements for providing addiction care, basically, and they got approved by Oregon Health Authority, billed some $2.3 million, and received reimbursements for $2.3 million over the course of less than a year, ending in March of 2024. Yes. No. Yes. I'm sorry, April 2024 to March 2025. Sorry. And so that happened to be 2 months after these residents of this house that Uplifting Journey was operating in Lake Oswego allegedly went up to Seattle and tried to kill that lady and robbed her. And
as most treatment facilities like to do. They like to
exactly,
dispatch people to
exactly.
other states and off them.
Exactly. So we wouldn't be having this conversation right now had that woman not crawled somehow to safety after they left her for dead alongside the highway in
Wow.
Washington. Because none of this would have come out. And so she, told the police, these are the guys that did it to me, and, her descriptions and stuff like that. And so that's how they ended up getting charged up there. And then, Katie Davis Court from the Post Millennial wrote a story about that, and about the fact that these guys lived in this house in Lake Oswego, and that she had found out that there were like 17 police visits to that house. And so the
police knew that this house
was a big problem. Like
and
noise
not
complaints,
problems.
No, like women screaming in the backyard is what one of the things neighbors reported. There were all kinds of problems with this house, and so luckily Katie linked to these police reports in her story, and I went through them, and they mentioned this Uplifting Journey. And so then I heard from a source that they maybe had received reimbursements from the state of Oregon, and then we're off to the races to where we are now. But so I bring up that background to say that what we've found so far, this $2.3 million to this Uplifting Journey that's sketchy as all get out, is very, very, very likely the tip of the iceberg in terms of social service fraud in the state of Oregon.
Yeah.
Because for two reasons. One is I just blundered into this story. And 99 out of 100 Uplifting Journeys are not going to have these Tren de Aragua guys go up and try to kill someone and have them fail.
Right. They're not going to get exposed by somebody who's doing that kind of stuff usually.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. So there's that issue. And then the fact, and this is something that I've really kind of only recently come to understand, almost all of the Medicaid reimbursements in Oregon flow from the federal government to the state government, and then to these things called community care organizations that are nonprofits. They're regional throughout the state. They help administer the Oregon Health Plan. Most of the Medicaid money goes from the state to those CCOs and then to the Uplifting Journeys or other providers in the state. The reason that's relevant here is that $2.3 million was the total that was reimbursed directly from OHA to Uplifting Journey. It's entirely possible and even likely, I think, that Uplifting Journey and other companies like it receive far more, because the vast bulk of the reimbursements are going to come through those CCOs, and we can't get public records from the CCOs.
Yeah, they're the classic sort of nonprofit or NGO style entity where when you want to make it impossible to find out what happened with the money and who decided who got it and how much people got paid and if they did anything that they were supposed to with it. You put it through one of those entities and you can't get it.
Yep.
And so now it means that this one just happened to shake loose and get exposed, but then there's a zillion others that haven't. And we know too that the same way that they were doing things that we're learning in Minnesota, and I believe also things are coming out for Washington State now too,
Yeah.
that they all kind of use this, what something invented by the CIA years ago in order to move money around the world and fund insurgencies and that kind of stuff, and secret agents and so on, has been adopted and used extensively by these folks to have the money all trickle through and then be almost untraceable. Like you only see the front end, the tiny little organization that seems to have some money, but they don't know from where and they don't know what they're doing. But it all traces back to these schemes of filling buckets by filling other buckets to the point where you need something of the scale, don't you, of what the federal government is capable of doing with its resources. And I actually think that potentially they are overwhelmed right now because they're flooding Minnesota with FBI agents, and because of the association with the Somali, I was going to say Somali American, but I'm not sure that some have the American part going for them. Some do and might not for long, actually, as well. Some of them might be denaturalized, is what they're saying. But they it's almost too much for even the federal government to just take the resources they have and say, we're going to go send FBI agents over there, because every time they find something, they find 10 other things.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, fortunately, the FBI isn't the only federal entity that can get into this stuff. I mean, there's fraud prevention at HHS, and there are more resources than just FBI. But yeah, no, I mean, I really think that we're seeing like I said, the tip of the iceberg in terms of what has been massive fraud. And it's maybe happening in red states too, but I know it's happening in blue states. And I mean, just from the records that I've seen from OHA, they don't require a lot to sign someone up and pay them $2.3 million. And you combine that with the fact that they want to maximize the amount of money flowing out the doors that they can say helps people, even though oftentimes, as in this case, I believe it doesn't. But they want to max out how much they're spending. They think that the big spending means that they're doing a good job.
Money.
So they don't mind that.
Care.
Yep, it just means I care. And then, are they, once they get caught, at the very least caught being negligent in administering these programs, they try to minimize it and they don't care about it. And that's what so far on this Uplifting Journey stuff, the state of Oregon, they're saying they can't say whether they're investigating, et cetera. But your underlying point's right, Kevin, that I think it will take the feds, because I sure don't. While I think OHA and Oregon DOJ need to investigate this thing, I have no faith that they will do an adequate job in that investigation.
The OHA, I would say, is so dysfunctional that we might just have to be satisfied that they figure out how to stop sending money to all the fraudulent entities. That would be the best we could hope for. They're certainly not helping anybody's health with this stuff. But the Oregon DOJ, that's supposed to have some resources. There's an attorney general in charge of it. Has Dan Rayfield said anything about this? Because anytime he comes up with and fabricates some sort of, well, President Trump's violating the Constitution or the law and files a lawsuit, he's got something to say about that. Does he have anything to say about this?
No. No, he hasn't said a word. His spokesperson hasn't said a word. She won't say whether they're investigating or not, which I get is their policy. So I'm not saying that's not
He
not
could say,
important.
he could say, we're aware of
Yes,
reports in the media, and we
yes,
are doing, please be reassured, we're doing absolutely everything we
yes,
can under the law for this, and I
yes.
can't comment on any of the specifics of the case. He could say that. He hasn't said that, right?
Yep. Yep. No, he hasn't said a thing. And you're right. That's at the very least what he and Tina Kotek should say. Um, and the only way they will say it is if they're absolutely forced to do it. And that's going to take media outside of me, talking about this stuff, and it's going to take probably take some of the more moderate-ish Dems to start saying things like, "Hey, this is a problem. Yeah, it's going to make you, Tina Kotek, look bad, but tough. Like we can't deal with this kind of fraud."
Has this is federal money, so I kind of assume that the feds have a right to step in on this because this entity operates across state lines. The person that was arrested, the Tren de Aragua guy, there's got to be some immigration issue there, or I mean, you don't get to come into the United States, hang out, and be part of that designated terrorist group, commit crimes, and not draw some federal scrutiny. And then it's federal funds that are being channeled into this. So I got to believe that the feds can throw literally whatever resources they can spare, if they have any, at this. And that is something that might compel some Democrats to start saying some things, because you can be on the right side or the wrong side of this whole thing. And the quieter they are, the more it makes me think, yeah, they must know this isn't going away and it's going to get bigger. So does this mean that it's so bad that if they talk about it, they might have some culpability for this, like directly? Because why be quiet? Why not virtue signal that you care about this and you're doing something about it? Why be silent?
I mean, part of it is this news story didn't come from their ecosystem, right? Like the progressives in Oregon are used to controlling the entire flow of information from beginning to end in the political process. And, if the Oregonian had done the work that I've done, you can be pretty sure they all would have said something about it by now. And they would have, they'd be taking it much more seriously than I think they are. They're hoping that this just, stays something that's, to the right of center in terms of interest level, and that they can ignore us. And that's, I think that's really cynical and gross, but that's exactly what I'm pretty sure that's what they're doing. And they're hoping they can wait it out and no one else cares.
So this is interesting because I think maybe you just spotted the bigger problem than the people running the state, who almost have no expectation of accountability, no expectation that they've got principles that they're going to make sure that there isn't cheating and waste and all that. They don't care. So but the real problem is the entities that could cause them to care, who are doing nothing about this. And has there been no coverage in the Oregonian, the Statesman Journal, the Eugene Register Guard, the Bend Bulletin, the esteemed Oregon Journalism Project? I think we both have some degree of respect for Nigel Jaquist, but they're pretty selective about what they do. He's connected with Willamette Week, who has done some good journalism over the years. Why the silence from all these?
Yeah, so the Oregonian did publish one story after Representative Ed Deal. Once I published the first article or two on this, he sent a letter to the state and the feds and said, "Hey, you guys need to look into this." The Oregonian wrote an article about his demand for an investigation, but it just cited what he was saying, and it said, like, Deal is relying on the reporting of I forget if they called me a blogger that time or whatever. And it was a lot of deal says. They didn't do any reporting of their own on it, and that's the only story. I mean, that's literally the only story outside of the Oregon Roundup's reporting, I think, from any outlet.
Well, this is the biggest dysfunction. That's why the state is a mess. It's that they're so selective about their outrage, and it almost never harms the powers that be.
Yeah.
It's so rare that it's almost Pulitzer Prize winning when it does happen, but it's just so rare, which means that, actually, once this catches fire nationally, which is how these things usually end up reverberating back to the state, then they'll start talking about it. Because that little trick you mentioned, I've seen that happen with campaigns. A Republican candidate will come out and say, will cite media reports and facts and government reports and statistics. And the media here will say that when it's a criticism of a Democrat, they'll say the Republican says this, not the Republican commented on these things that are true.
Yeah.
But that the Republican said it, so maybe it's not true.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just politics. And so go back to sleep.
It gives their readers an out. It gives their readers who are already predisposed not to believe things Republicans say a way to ignore the story partially. Yeah.
Well, this one has all the pieces that could easily get the attention of the highest levels of the federal government, I think. This is really one tweet away from becoming a massive national story itself. It almost writes itself as a dumb criminal, can't believe this is true, Netflix production. It really does. And my favorite is this guy, Julius Maximo, which sounds like a name invented by a scriptwriter, not a real person.
Yeah.
And he's dressed like he fell out of a 1987 Miami Vice episode. That Crockett and Tubbs had this young local drug dealer giving him information, and that's what he looks like. And
and if you look at the background on his picture, the one on the picture on the right, and we're looking at the story I published today, probably there's concertina wire on the top of it looks like he's having his picture taken in a prison. Yeah. And that, I mean, I don't think those are pictures in the United States, obviously, but that's the whole it is the weirdest story between the kidnapping and the drilling and the Julius Maximo, and now we've got this connection to Arizona with this. So
Theodore Mucuriana
or whatever. Yeah. I'm sorry, I kill his name every time I try to say it. This pastor in Arizona who co-signed on one of Uplifting Journey's leases, and this pastor's being charged by the Democratic Attorney General of the state of Arizona for laundering $5 million out of a Medicaid fraud ring in Arizona. This is connected, it's connected. And and that's not the only connection between the Oregon stuff and what has been charged by the Democratic Attorney General in Arizona as a $60 million Medicaid fraud ring. There's common people associated with both companies outside of the pastor. I think whatever they were doing up here is probably a lot like what they were doing down in Arizona.
Which makes it even more amazing that Dan Rayfield has nothing to say. I mean, there's plenty of cover here for him to say, well, I wasn't Attorney General when this started. I'm shocked and disappointed and dismayed. And I'm working together with my colleague in Arizona who probably does some of these anti-Trump
Oh yeah,
administration lawsuits.
yeah.
He's saying none of that, which
Yeah.
means it must be really bad for them politically at some
Well,
level.
I don't, you know, it's so interesting the politics around this now. I mean, I started reporting on it over the summer before I knew about any of this Minnesota stuff and before the Minnesota stuff became a huge deal, even though it had been reported on for a while previously, I guess. Is that it's, of course, like everything else, it's become hyper political. And, you know, you've got people in Minnesota saying, well, Trump's being racist by trying to enforce the law here in Minnesota. So the politics of having, you know, Kotek or Rayfield come out right now or sometime soon and say, listen, we're, you know, like what you said, we're aware of this, taking it seriously, you know, blah, blah, blah. Then in a way they're supporting, I guess, at least at one level, what Trump's argument is that there's a lot of fraud happening in these blue states and we need to stop it. So there's a lot of reasons why they don't want to say anything. And then if the feds do come in, then they'll just say they're racist. So that's probably the way this ends up.
They must not be that concerned that the voters in Oregon will hear about it and care.
Yep.
Because if they were, they'd get out ahead of it and say, you know, I was there in the beginning saying X, Y, and Z. Or that maybe they figure the media will just help them reconstruct a false narrative from the past that they all care
Yep.
about it and did something about it later when they're forced to. But this is why maybe the loyal opposition needs to be absolutely livid and vocal. Because you're right. This isn't just when this first came out in April, we figured there probably was fraud in around the country. We had no idea that 9 billion of it could be in one state. But the this is an opportunity for them to get out in front of it, but it does further a national narrative. And so anything Trump says, they have to say the opposite as long as they can, because
Yep.
they're trying to seize the narrative back because all they care about is the 2026 election. They don't give a crap if 9 billion or $100 billion disappear. They don't care if criminals
Yep.
are running around the state. They don't care if illegal immigrant or Tren de Aragua members are running around kidnapping and murdering people. They don't care. They
Right.
just care about the 2026 election. So voters have to care about this and have it affect the 2026 election. That's why hats off to you and pushing this. And Ed Deal.
Yep.
We had him on a couple of weeks ago, and he talked about it and said that he was getting information and speaking out.
Yep.
I do think it would be great if some of the most prominent Republicans in the state running for office said something about this,
Yep.
especially when it might be happening in their own backyard.
Yep.
I don't get it, but
I
you
don't.
know,
I don't either. I think it. You know, it takes a while for these things to work through the ecosystem. But you know, with everything in the news about Minnesota, you'd think that now would be the time,
now
right?
would be the
For,
time.
you know, and they can. I linked, especially in that piece I published today. I linked to all the original documents, and their teams can go through there and make sure that I'm right. But you know, I'm not making any of this stuff up. I get it all from documents and things people tell me. So yeah, no, it's a huge story. It would be great to see. You know, Ed's been fantastic on this, as he is on so many things. It'd be great to see some other Republicans join him.
Yeah. Well, we're sending the word out that it's
Yeah.
time. And I do think that some people think you just wait for it to become a big story and then say, you know, those Democrats, see, they're screwing up again. But I think that the days where they've tried that and over and it hasn't really worked are over. I think that the days where you do like what Monique Despain did down in the
Yep.
fourth district and
Yep.
drove and drove and drove the story to get all the details out about what Val Hoyle was doing with Lamoda, and it turns out there's like 10 other things
Mhm.
that Val Hoyle was mixed up in that
Yep.
just wreck Val Hoyle's credibility, but driving that story and then the media finally covering it. That's what we could do everywhere with stories like this.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is this is an unforced error.
Yep.
Uh, you know,
And I wonder, it's kind of another test. I'm sure there's other stuff you want to talk about, but I wonder how much Kotak et al. Underestimate the ability of the kind of new, calling it the new media, the
yeah,
kind of the conservative kind of ecosystem that exists now in Oregon, in terms of news media, in terms of comment podcasts like yours, and there's just a lot more going on that they don't have their fingers in than even 5 years ago. And I think the evidence that they may not understand that, the biggest evidence is this gas tax thing. Like the Kotek severely miscalculated.
yeah.
She would not have done what she did if she thought there was any chance that they were going to get 250,000 signatures, or even 100,000 signatures. Like she discounted the whole threat. She acted like it wasn't ever going to happen. And that was a huge miscalculation on her part. Huge miscalculation on her part. If she somehow loses next year, that's going to be why.
That's going to be part of that story as to why this really happened.
Yeah. But there's the conservative media or right of center media, whatever, is gaining traction now because they're people who try to tell the truth for the most part, and people are sick of being lied to by this state government, and it happens all the time, and they get away with it because the people that generally cover what the state government does in Oregon are supporters of theirs, like ideological, compatriots with the people who govern the state. So they're not going to drive hard on this stuff.
Yeah, this is when you agree with the policies and you're like, well, and then you agree with the excuses why the policies don't work, then it's not really a media outlet anymore. It's and I will say that Democrats have criticized this too, of the media. A lot of the traditional media, they have almost no local reporting anymore.
Yeah.
They have if they have an editorial staff or page, they don't do, some of them don't do guest columns or op-eds anymore, or letters to the editor even. And they do this cookie cutter news, which is just using their mother company as a wire service to feed them all those things. Like I'm thinking the Statesman Journal and the Register Guard, they cut back all their local staff, and they're now effectively just storefronts for USA Today, which is not exactly right of center, to put it mildly. And then the Oregonian, all of them have shrunk. They're all dependent on online clickbait stuff now. They don't sell pieces of paper anymore with their print on it to the extent that they once did. But I also think that that's caused them to be afraid to say anything, for fear that there could be an online backlash against them. And then they lose some of their advertising funding. They demonetize themselves effectively by ticking off a core base group. But without local reporting, until the USA Today reports on this, you may not hear about it.
No, I mean that's really true. I think there's a decent chance the local folks don't report on it unless and until the feds get involved, and then they probably report on it in a negative fashion. I mean, honestly, that's probably what's going to.
Trump sticks his nose in Oregon's business again.
Exactly. I mean, it'll be the same dynamic as what's happening in Minnesota.
Well, so would you take this bet that there's a bigger chance that Dan Rayfield will file a lawsuit against the feds trying to scrutinize the Medicare system for its it's corruption problems, then that he will make a public comment, aggressive public comment, talking about he's on top of it and investigating the fraud in Oregon.
Yeah, no, I think there's a much higher chance he files a lawsuit. And I could actually see that happening if the Trump administration takes enforcement action on this stuff in Oregon. He'll find some reason to why the Oregon way is ruined by this federal action against Medicaid fraud. It's kind of depressing when you put it that way, Kevin.
I'm sorry.
It's
Well,
okay.
yeah, but it is contained in the heart of all these problems is the solution. Once people agree and focus in on it, it's there, right? It's not like it's hidden and we don't know what the problem is. It's just that no one is solving it. And so I'm trying to pull up this. It's not pulling up this article, but I wanted to pull out the article that talks about the petition thing pulling in 250,000 signatures.
Mhm.
And that's an important thing. That's a backlash. And I'm surprised actually that hasn't seen a little bit more national coverage, because it is a backlash based on the unaffordability of the state being made
Yep.
worse for working class people by the state government.
Yep. Yeah. No, it's a big story. I mean, I think it's one of the biggest Oregon political stories that I've seen. To be honest with you, I mean, in terms of how unexpected. I mean, the whole gas tax saga has been just bizarre. These lengthy sessions, these two sick Democratic legislators that they had to work around and try to get them in the building to vote. It failing the first time, Kotek sitting on signing it for a month. It's just been bizarre, and it's been pulling teeth for her to ram that thing through. But she has been determined to ram it through anyway, and people got mad. I mean, people got really mad, and 250,000 people coming out to sign a petition collected by volunteers. Someone responded to something I put on Twitter or X earlier today, wanting to compare like the spending to get Measure 110 on the ballot and the number of signatures that they got versus the spending that that the no gas tax people did and the number of signatures. I mean, I haven't done that. I haven't looked at that yet, but it is an interesting comparison because I think Measure 110 spent like $6 million getting that thing on the ballot and getting it approved by the voters. And the no gas tax people have spent a pittance, and so it's evidence of just a really torqued off electorate. I think that it tapped into a lot of discontent about affordability. I think that's where a lot of this kind of latent knowledge about Oregon's government and how wasteful it is and how corrupt it is. That's something that a lot of people in Oregon who don't spend a lot of time doing political stuff believe. Like they know it. They're not dumb. They get it. They're like, yeah, no, the state wastes a bunch of money and they're all corrupt. And this gas tax thing has become something that channels all that frustration over, just being, frankly lied to in so many different ways for so many years. And it's just fascinating to watch. It's a really interesting story.
So what do you think is going to be the outcome? Because look, 250,000 signatures with an 85% validity rate. I can see here it has officially qualified according to the story that was just posted this afternoon. And 250,000 signatures is in the neighborhood of what you need to start thinking about constitutional amendments. And these people remain on a list that you can go back to and say, remember when you signed this? Well, here's what the governor did or the legislature did in response. They said, screw you guys. And they decided that they don't care about how much they pissed you off. They're just going to pitch you off some more, but they don't care They're going to do what they
yeah,
want. What are you going to
yeah,
do about it? Here's
yeah,
another petition, maybe to fundamentally change how the state government works. It's awfully close to the neighborhood if you piss off even more people, and have more time to do recalls and stuff like that,
yeah,
of
yeah,
statewide officials. That is something. But I think there's almost like a single digit percent chance that they'll just sit there and let it go to the November 2026 ballot doing nothing, because even the people who didn't like the tax and didn't want to support it, that were Democrats who had to have their arms twisted or be rolled in, with an IV and a near
yeah,
death, and all these people, they didn't really love this. It took them multiple tries. It took them a month and a half of a special session after it failed
yeah.
the regular session. But the one thing that unites them all is that they all want to get reelected, and they don't want to run on the November 2026 ballot next to this referendum.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that it's probably viewed as a political imperative by Kotek to not have that thing on the ballot in November,
And they'll have the votes, even if
they
they don't
will.
have the votes for the solution.
Yeah, because even if you add just kind of the more moderate Dems to all the Republicans are going to vote to repeal it. I mean, they have to, even if they wanted to, kind of make Kotek look bad. You'd have to vote for that repeal if it's a clean repeal. So yeah, that may very well happen if SEIU lets her do it. That's the other thing. SEIU's been driving this bus the whole time.
Yeah,
because they want more union dues from these people they're going to hire, and I've got to think that has a lot to do with why Tina's already been banging her head against the wall for so long on this thing and taking lots of political arrows, including from people in her own party. And she's stuck with it. And, I imagine she's a pretty tenacious person. So there's some of that too.
right.
But what is SEIU going to do? Are they going to say, yeah, you know what, you're good on this, Tina, let's sit this one out, we're gonna lose? I don't know if that's the way SEIU does business.
No, they know they have to win. Yeah. They're as serious about it as Republicans are about running private businesses and making a profit. That's their profit. That's how SEIU profits from all the stuff that they're doing and all the money they're taking from members and putting it into this. But at the same time, they have to pick another path. There are the votes to say not November. The question is, are there the votes from Democrats to do one of the other scenarios? I think the easiest one vote-wise is probably to move the date to say May and put it on the primary ballot, right?
Boy, I think they might try that. I think that would be galactically stupid for the Democrats from their perspective, because I think a lot of people know that Tina sat on this bill forever to even sign it, that she played the Dems played all these procedural games throughout the whole thing. And now they're trying to take it from an election where a lot of people are going to vote and put it in an election where not many people vote. I think if I was a moderate-ish Dem in the legislature, I'd be like, we cannot even try that. To me, I think it's got to be repeal or partial. Maybe they try to do a partial repeal. I think changing that date is just. I mean, they may try it.
Yeah, it's less stupid than leaving it on the November 2026 ballot, but it's not much better.
No, that's true, because at least when it gets walloped in May, they're not on the ballot with it. The question is, does moving that election make it even worse in terms of them looking anti-democratic, which is what they've already looked in this process? That's what's really harmful about this to them, is just how anti-democratic they've been through this whole process. And so doing that and clearly doing something else to, in a way, this is the language they'd use, disenfranchise X% of Oregon voters who vote in November and not in May, that's that might bite come November, even if it's not on the ballot then.
Well, I think so. The next possibility really is there's two others. One is they just negate the taxes and make the referendum sort of disappear
Yep.
because they'll repeal those. And then what do? They can not pass anything. And Democrats do like to punish voters, especially if they can blame right wing Republicans, in
Yeah.
their minds for
Yep.
launching the referendum. 250,000 is a lot, but it's still only 10% of the electorate. And so they might not view it as a sampling of the overall voters, but just as a backlash from the right. So they'll punish the voters who aren't paying attention to any of this in the middle by doing budget cuts they say that can't be avoided. And then, of
Yep.
course, that gets into a murkier debate where they use their media advantage to push that narrative. The
Yep.
other possibility is they have another set of revenue enhancements that they put into place that are more populist. I can't think of what they
Yep.
would be right now, but it could be like a tax on rich people or
Yeah, an
something.
income tax hike of some sort. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tax on luxury vehicles, like make $1,000
Right.
tax on luxury vehicles or something like that.
Yep.
And
Yep.
the ones
Yeah.
that Democrats themselves drive, by the way, in many cases,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
their
They would exclude
nonprofit
EVs.
executive directors that they're sending money to.
Yeah. No, that's true. With Kotek having said, if it doesn't pass, I have to lay these people off and make these cuts, and she keeps breaking that promise. She's painted herself in such a terrible corner on this. It may not matter come 26. I mean, it hasn't before, but she has gotten herself in just a really, really tough political spot on this gas tax thing.
Yeah, she has, and it's a pig in a poke, and she doesn't have an easy or good way out of it. But and they've got to they're going to have a come to Jesus conversation with SEIU and see how it comes out. But I guarantee you they will have some strategy. The thing is,
Oh
so
yeah,
far, not impressed with their strategizing. The almost everything they set out to do, at least in terms of budget and taxes and spending, has failed.
yep,
In since Tina in this biennium so far, the 2025-2026 thing so far looks bad. They haven't passed some of their priorities. They screwed up and had to call special sessions, and now they're creating a populist backlash, which, if it manifests itself at the ballot box, will actually do real political damage to them on some level.
and that's why they'll just talk about Donald Trump from now. I mean, even more, right? If that's possible, they will talk about she in particular will talk about Donald Trump nonstop between now and November of next year,
Well,
and
so
that
Jeff,
might work.
Jeff, he's a threat to democracy. You know what isn't a threat to democracy, apparently, is quietly loosening the voter registration rules days before Christmas. If you caught that one, that story is eking out. Ed Deal kind of exposed it, and they're making it easier for people to register without a signature, a validated signature on file from a state ID or any ID to verify their identity, much less their citizenship. As we know,
Yeah.
they're facing lawsuits, by the way, which I think actually might succeed from the federal government. Harmeet Dillon,
Mhm.
who is the Deputy Attorney General for Civil Rights, is pursuing this hammer and tongs, and she knows what she's doing. And
Mhm.
she's getting even some of these blue state governors to wither a bit under the pressure of
Yeah.
federal lawsuits, which have some teeth behind them.
Mhm.
They do have, they are a powerful stakeholder, and everybody votes in a federal election, presumably, or so many people do that if a bunch of people who aren't supposed to vote in federal elections are on the voter rolls, they can get at that. And they probably will have some court decisions that will help them, which means that Oregon's days of saying that we're going to pretend like no one can examine our voter rolls are numbered. And now I think it was interesting that all the federal government has asked for in order to examine Oregon's voter rolls with regard to eligibility to vote in federal elections, they didn't even ask for the same information you need to go and apply for like credit. It's like the last four digits of the social security
Yeah.
number, name and address. I think that's it.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that's what they just changed the standard for registration to, the last four digits of a social security number. So, and date of birth, I guess. That was the other thing. So this is going to get real interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, no, I think it will. And the most troubling thing about our voting system to me is that the Dems they insist upon saying it's secure every time they talk about it. And this this is that's more than anything else, that's what makes me think they're hiding something big. And I don't know what it is. If I did know, I would report on it. I've done some reporting on the registering of the illegals, and we'll have more to do on that.
Well, it's the Joseph Goebbels thing, right? If you're going to tell a lie, tell a big lie and tell it
Yeah.
over and over to the point where people won't actually believe somebody telling them that it's a lie.
Yep.
And that's what they've been doing. Plus, it's a complaint-driven system, so they know they can kind of bury any possibility by preventing any scrutiny or audits. They can just say it's secure, and unless you actually find a fraudulent person casting a vote and report them, which is almost impossible to do.
Yes.
Then
Yep.
they claim it's clean, and you can't prove them otherwise.
Well, and then when they find out that people did actually vote illegally, at least a few of them, they didn't prosecute them. So it's I mean, there's what they think about it. They don't care. It's a lot like this Medicaid fraud stuff. They just, I don't know to what degree voter fraud happens in Oregon. If I did know, I would definitely report on it. But they sure don't want to know, and they don't want anyone else to know, because it would make them look bad. And that's why every time they say Oregon's vote by mail system is secure, blah, it's like, maybe it is, but why do you guys keep saying it? That's the part that makes me nervous.
Just ignore the critics if it's so great. You know, they're afraid somebody might believe these things because they know that actually, if public pressure built and said we want an audit, they'd have a problem.
Yep.
I mean, we already know that it was 55,000 people could not be certified as having proof of citizenship who were on the voter rolls last November.
Yeah.
2024. We know it. And they stopped the automatic voter registration system from registering people, motor voter, 10 days before the deadline, because they couldn't fix it in time to stop it from continuing to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then that's it. Then they're like, well, the problem is solved.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's solved. But
no, I think it's definitely not solved. And I'm sitting on what is probably a public records request lawsuit that I need to file against the governor's office, because they're still withholding. They redacted some stuff from a public record about the registering of illegals that I don't think they were entitled to do. So when I get some free time, I might end up suing them.
Well, and they have a religious-like devotion to shielding illegal immigrants from being even counted or identified or known. They literally want the state flooded with people that they don't know who they are, and they want to give them unlimited taxpayer-funded services, and frankly, to give them a free get-out-of-jail card for crimes committed, even when they are here. That is what a sanctuary state really is. It's not a place where, a dishwasher and a berry picker moved to Oregon after running across the border with their kids, and they just make a living and quietly, hide away in the state without scrutiny. No, this is the Tren de Aragua guys that are getting away with it. We have an example of this in, you might have seen, again, Monique Despain wrote this opinion piece calling out the attacks by Democrats on federal and local law enforcement for clamping down and actually making sure that these Colombian home invasion suspects who entered the country during Joe Biden's tenure couldn't escape and flee the jurisdiction after they got released on 10% bail down. And this is guys have been doing this for a year. And what was the response of the Democrats? Religious like fanaticism. You
Yep.
can't, you shouldn't have sent ICE agents to the doors of the
Right.
jail in Lane County to arrest these people. How
Yeah.
dare you? As
Yeah.
these people tried to flee.
I love the Oregonians coverage of all that. I never read any of it, but I see the headlines, and it's, ICE agents have, detain father while he's taking his toddler to preschool. It's always these, like, it's always what I'm like, dude,
Dad.
it's like, does ICE ever detain people when they're not doing something that in the telling would be touching emotionally to the reader? I assume they're detaining a lot of people doing a lot of other stuff too that the Oregonian doesn't see fit to cover.
Well, there's going to have to be a reckoning on statistics because Democrats are claiming that 80% of the people being arrested by ICE have no criminal records and and are not criminals. And ICE and CBP and DHS are saying almost exactly the opposite. They're saying that it's like on the order of at least 70% have criminal records, and the rest are usually present where people with criminal records are operating.
Right.
Sometimes they're interfering with the arrest or providing cover for these folks. And if you and I do that for a wanted criminal, a felon, sought by the federal, we would be in trouble.
We'd be going to jail. Yeah. I mean, I guess if in a certain regard, I don't know that it makes a whole lot of sense if they have a criminal record, or difference rather, whether they have a criminal record aside from being in the country illegally. I mean, that's what ICE's job is, to get people out of the country that aren't supposed to be here. So, that's what enforcing immigration laws is. And I get it from an enforcement perspective. You kind of prioritize your resources around getting the really bad guys that you need to get out of the country. But if they have a criminal record, if they're here illegally.
Yeah, it's like saying, that they're otherwise peaceful, innocent identity thieves, or, I mean, it's like, oh, okay. Well, if it wasn't for the identity theft, they would be otherwise just perfect citizens. And nothing to move along, nothing to see here, quit prioritizing your resources but so you've covered a number of other things. If you got just maybe 2 or 3 minutes left here, I think we're looking at this next year. The whole argument over Phil Knight's dollars is the whole reason why there's even a campaign finance set of laws that got passed.
Of course.
Because that's all the Democrats wanted to stop. They're fine if George Soros sprinkles, 300 grand into whatever group. But Phil Knight writes a check. And Phil Knight's not exactly a right-wing extremist either. No. He's donated to Kulongoski and Democrats over the years too, but he feels like it's out of balance. So he started writing checks to get the legislature, state legislature. And you wrote a story about Cyrus Javadi, a former Republican, attacking and criticizing Phil Knight and Phil Knight's money, which he gladly took and spent in his race when he was a Republican just last year.
Yeah, it's fine. I might not be on his mailing list and email list anymore, but I was on his email list. I think because I had emailed with him to get some comments on the gas tax stuff. And while I don't appreciate his vote on that, he was actually pretty responsive and gave me some, legit information.
Explain it. Yeah.
But I got his newsletter, that is pumped out just to people that I assume the vast majority of whom are Democrats. I mean, the thing could have been written by SEIU. It was just like this This guy was a Republican, like what, 3 months ago, 4 months ago, um, and it's just all this hammer and tongs, like partisan stuff. And then he goes after Knight and his $3 million donation to that GOP outfit. And I'm like, as soon as I saw that, I'm like, oh man, I know how this works. You took some of that money. I'll bet you took some of that money. So I'm Orstar, and sure enough, he did. And it's just part of what needs to happen in Oregon, which is one side has gotten away with saying and doing whatever they want for a very, very long time. And that's not okay. That's part of the reason we're in the shape we're in right now, because the Cyrus Javadis of the world can act like complete partisan SEIU Democrats when they were just a Republican, and like no one calls them on it. And I think that's important when someone does something like that, to say, well, now hold on a second here, Cyrus. What about this other stuff? And the other outlets aren't going to do that. It's going to be people on our side that are, trying to provide balance to what Oregonians know about what's going on to their state.
Yeah. So Cyrus is, I think, somebody who's not very close to his own messaging and running campaigns, because he clearly outsourced it to somebody else who wrote all this stuff for him before, when we thought he meant that stuff. And now we know he doesn't mean it, but now he's outsourced it to other people who apparently don't check his own Orstar campaign finance filing.
Yeah. I'm sure it's a very similar email went out from all the legislative Dems. I just am not on their on their list.
Well, so just the last thought I was going to ask you about is, so we've just talked about 2025. We've talked a little bit about 2026, but this is sort of prognostications and expectations. Do you think we're going to see, what are we going to see in 2026? It's any different than what we've seen in 2025? And do you see any trends kind of that where it's moving, where there's going to be a breakthrough? There could be some Republican victories, or the Democrats are going to, seize the day and have Republicans on the defense everywhere. What is it?
In Oregon, I think that a lot of what happens here is going to be determined by the national environment. I wish that were not the case. I've wished that were not the case for a long time. Because, but for the national environment, I think we'd have different people running the state right now, just because their performance has been so terrible. And, you do have, a midterm election for a sitting Republican president in 26. Those traditionally go badly for the president's party. That makes a difference here in Oregon. It does. And if it's nationally, if it's kind of a typical good Democrat year in a midterm election when a Republican's president, that's going to be tough. If it's worse than that for Republicans, then it's going to put a lot of races that should be in, take the Javadi race, that should not be a Democrat seat after this. It just shouldn't. He should not win that race by any kind of general political understanding. But if it gets, if the national environment's bad enough that, Democrats are jazzed to vote and Republicans are staying at home, and the people in the middle are kind of feeling more Democrat than feeling Republican, those are the kind of seats that can go the other way. And so I think and I don't know what the national stuff's going to look like. It's going to have a lot to do with the economy, probably. Are we going to slip into a recession, or are we going to start growing faster? And I guess I'm not an economist, but it seems like indications are that it could go either way.
If the economy across the rest of the country, and especially in red states, is booming, which there is some possibility of that, but in Oregon it's bad, it's a full percentage point higher unemployment rate. They're doing all the things they can to chase businesses out. Businesses are laying people off. Taxes are going up. It's an expensive state, affordability wise. Are the Democrats, aren't they going to pay any penalty for doing a much worse job than all the rest of the country? Or are they going to be able to blame the mess they created on Trump? That is the fundamental question, isn't it, for 2020?
Yeah, I think that is the fundamental question about next year's election. I think that the Democrats in Oregon will do everything they can to blame Trump for whatever's going wrong in Oregon. They'll talk about when it's affordability, they'll talk about tariffs. When it's you can see, like, if fraud comes up in Oregon, you can see. I saw it on Twitter just before getting on here that Tim Walz was out tweeting about, we've always taken fraud seriously in Minnesota, but unlike us, Donald Trump has done blah, 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 blah to love fraud. And, that's the kind of just bizarre kind of communication that I think we're going to get, and we have been getting from the Democrats here. So I think, the question I think Democrats do pay a price for how badly they've governed Oregon. I mean, I think they'd be winning by more if they actually did a good job. But that's not. They're not in the business. Oregon Democrats are, generally speaking, not in the business of doing a good job as you and I would define it. They're interested in winning social justice wars, in standing up to Donald Trump, who's the big bad guy. So they have different incentives than most Oregonians.
Well, we're going to have to flip the political script. We're going to have to flip the entire script. It sounds like, and make it so that it's obvious to people that what they're getting in Oregon is vastly inferior to what the rest of the country is getting in terms of leadership and economic growth and affordability. And if that can be done, then maybe people will be able to pin the tail on the donkey on this one.
Maybe. We'll see.
I guess I just thought I'd end with an optimistic note, because
it could happen.
It could happen. And of course, part of the reason why it would happen is because of the great work that you do, Jeff, at Oregon Roundup, OregonRoundup.substack.com, and of course your podcast. Everybody follow Jeff on social media as well. I think it's at Jeff Eager, right?
Jeff_Eager on Twitter.
Jeff_Eager, yep, on X. And you can actually get more information about what's going on than reading almost any other paper in the country, or in the state for that matter. But just know that we got to share it with folks and do stuff like what we're doing here tonight. So do share this show with everyone you can, and they will feel that their intellect, their IQ has jumped by 10, 20 points just by watching tonight's episode.
Wow. We need to make sure people in Salem are watching it then.
Yeah, well, they might be impervious to that.
Or it's starting at a very low.
Yes, they're starting at a low point. So, I guess we just have to hope for the best there. But anyway, thanks again for being on, Jeff, and sharing your stories with us. And again, Happy New Year to you and your family.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it. Same to you.
Thank you. All right, folks. I will see you. I might see you tomorrow night. I think we might be doing a year-end episode. I'm talking to Don about it. But in case I don't, happy 2025 or 2026. And, enjoy tomorrow night. Watch the ball drop, and then get ready for election year 2026 coming our way. We'll be ready too. Have a great night, everyone.